Welcome to another deep dive with us. You guys sent in a recent interview with Anthony Gordon, and I gotta say, it's full of fascinating insights into his mindset. And you know what? It's not just the sports fans either.
Definitely not.
Gordon's thoughts on obsession and work ethic and team dynamics are relevant to anyone, you know?
Yeah,
Whether you're aiming for that promotion at work or if you're tackling like a big creative project.
absolutely. And the source material is really interesting. It's a YouTube interview. It's from That's Football, which gives it a really casual conversational feel.
Yeah,
Like we're just eavesdropping on Gordon's real thoughts.
exactly. And speaking of real, one word that just kept popping up throughout this whole interview was obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no coincidence either, right?
Right.
The interview was actually for Adidas's Predator boots,
Oh, okay.
which are, themed around that very concept.
Makes
He
sense.
even jokes about the interviewer getting tired of hearing him say it.
Oh, really?
But you can tell it's more than just a marketing buzzword for him.
Yeah, for sure. What's so fascinating about it to me is he's openly embracing the grind,
Right.
the relentless pursuit of improvement.
Yeah.
Like he's really not shying away from the hard work. And I think that's refreshing, honestly.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. Why is that so striking, do you think?
Well, it goes against the typical cool and composed athlete persona that we see all the time, right?
Yeah.
Gordon's openly saying, look, I'm obsessed with getting better. He's not just relying on talent, he's putting in the work, the hours. He's talking about repetition, repetition, repetition. And that's such a powerful takeaway for anyone listening. It makes you kind of, look in the mirror and say, am I really willing to commit to that level of dedication?
Yeah, it makes you question your own level of commitment, right? And this whole idea of dedication, it actually leads to another really revealing moment in the interview. He talks about the buzz that his pregame routines created after an earlier interview with Gary Neville.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember those routines?
Vaguely.
They were intense, man.
I bet.
Like, talk about meticulous preparation.
Yeah, and it seems like he felt the need to address those routines because people were just judging him solely on his performance on the field,
Mm-hmm.
which, highlights the pressure athletes face wanting to be seen as more than just their wins and losses.
You mentioned that he felt the need to address those pregame routines. Why do you think that is?
Well, remember, he was getting judged pretty harshly based purely on what was happening on the field. And revealing these routines kind of allows him to say, hey, look, there's a lot more that goes into this than what you see for 90 minutes. It's like he's almost asking for a more holistic judgment.
I see. So it kind of humanizes him a bit.
Exact.
But back to those routines, we don't have to get into every detail.
Right.
But it was intense. It makes you realize how much preparation goes on behind the scenes. Like all the stuff that the fans don't see.
Absolutely. And it really speaks volumes about his dedication.
Yeah.
He's meticulously planning, visualizing, and just getting in the right headspace. That doesn't just happen, it's intentional. And I think that's something we can all learn from and apply to our own lives.
So we've got this obsession with improvement, right? And this meticulous preparation. Where does that actually lead Gordon? Well, 2 years ago, he joins Newcastle, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about how proud he is of his progress, how it aligns with his initial vision when he joined.
And this is where I think the timing of the interview gets really interesting. It marks the 2-year anniversary of him joining the team, so it's almost like a self-imposed progress report.
It is, right? It gives it this added layer of like reflection. Like he's looking back at those 2 years and saying, okay, I'm on track.
Exactly. And what I find even more interesting is he sees the club, the manager, and himself all on an upward trajectory. Like this is classic growth mindset?
Yeah, it is. And when he talks about Newcastle being on this journey, it's not just about his personal ambition either, right?
Right.
He emphasizes the collective spirit, how everyone has gotten better together.
That's so important. And I think it speaks to the power of having a shared vision. It's not just Gordon striving for excellence, it's the entire team. They're all pushing each other, to reach new heights.
Hmm.
And that creates a completely different energy than a team where each individual is just, focused on their own success.
That's like, think about the difference in those work environments, right?
Oh, totally.
Like in one, everyone's pulling in the same direction, and then the other one, it's every man for himself.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. He also talks about the necessity of individual goals.
Okay.
He even says some might see it as self-arrogance. So how do you square that with this whole team-first mentality?
That's a great question. That's where it gets really interesting. It's something I think a lot of us grapple with. How do you balance your personal ambition with the needs of the team. It's almost like walking a tightrope, right?
It is.
And Gordon seems to acknowledge this. He doesn't pretend that his ambition is always going to be popular or that it's going to treat well with everyone. He's honest about it, and I think that honesty is really key to building trust within a team.
Okay, so we're seeing this theme of self-awareness kind of emerge.
Yeah,
He knows his strengths, his weaknesses, and even how other people might perceive him. But he's not letting any of that stop him. That leads us to another really interesting observation that he makes about Newcastle's culture. He talks about how in a way, it naturally weeds out those who don't buy in.
yeah, it's almost like it's self-selecting in a way.
Right. He specifically mentions Alexander Isak, who came in with a high transfer fee.
Right.
He points out how Isak is really proving his worth, evolving each season. So he's using Isak as an example of someone who really bought into that culture and thrived because of it.
Exactly.
What do you think he means by the culture naturally weeding people out?
I think it's like there's this unspoken code, right?
Yeah.
This set of values that everyone on the team understands.
Mhm.
And those who don't align with it, well, they just don't last very long.
They just don't fit. It's not about excluding anyone. It's just about finding the right fit. Now, just to lighten things up a bit, Gordon admitted he hasn't experienced a packed St. James's Park on a European night yet.
Oh, wow.
I even teased him about getting him tickets.
That's great.
But he paints this really vivid picture of the fans' intensity,
Yeah.
almost a religious fervor,
Yeah.
for the club. And I think what's really interesting there is how his description goes beyond just like noise and excitement.
Right.
He's talking about this shared energy, this sense of community that elevates everyone. You can almost feel it through his words, like how much it means to him.
Definitely.
It makes you wonder, like, how much of an impact that kind of passionate support actually has on the players.
It must be incredible and maybe a bit intimidating too.
Yeah. I think what we've got here is a really solid foundation.
Yeah.
When we come back, I want to kind of delve deeper into Gordon's development as a player and how this obsession that we're talking about has really shaped his journey. So stick with us.
It's incredible to see that kind of drive in someone so young.
Yeah.
And in the interview, you get a sense of where that comes from. He talks about how, early in his career, he was missing this crucial element. He says he was missing the end product.
So he's talking about goals.
Exactly. Putting the ball in the net.
Right.
And it seems like that realization was like a real turning point for him.
Mm-hmm.
He recognized that talent alone wasn't going to cut it,
Right.
He needed to actually hone those skills, become more clinical in front of goal. It's like that light bulb moment,
Yeah.
Potential has to be converted into results.
Yeah, and that's where the obsession comes in.
Exactly.
It's about bridging that gap, right?
Yeah.
Between potential and performance, pushing himself to become that complete player he envisions.
And you can see it's paying off, right?
Yeah.
He talks about how good it feels to now be consistently delivering those goals, to be having that tangible impact on the game.
It's like he's unlocked a new level in a video game,
Totally.
but it's real life.
Right.
And it took real effort to get there.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Mm-hmm.
So how does he actually go about doing that?
He's actually very specific in the interview. He talks about, putting in the extra hours, working on those finishing drills, left foot, right foot. He calls it repetition, repetition, repetition.
So it's not just about wanting it, it's about putting in the work day after day.
Yeah.
It's like, a musician practicing scales or a writer editing their drafts.
Exactly. That's exactly what he's doing. He's building that muscle memory so that when the pressure's on, those actions, they just become instinctive.
This whole idea of repetition and deliberate practice. I mean, this is something I think everyone listening can apply to their own lives, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's learning a new language, mastering a musical instrument, or just becoming more effective at work,
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway here for the listener, do you think?
It's about recognizing that mastery takes time. It takes dedicated effort. There are no shortcuts to excellence, right?
Right.
And Gordon's story is a great reminder that talent, it needs to be nurtured, honed, and refined through consistent practice.
So we've talked about Gordon's individual journey,
Right.
but he keeps coming back to Newcastle's journey as a whole as well.
Yeah.
He emphasizes how everyone at the club, from the manager to the players, has just gotten better together.
Yeah, and he highlights how that sense of shared progress, it makes it so much easier for new players to integrate into the team. It's like all ships rise with the tide.
Yeah, it creates this virtuous cycle where success breeds success.
Exactly.
But Earlier we talked about Gordon's emphasis on individual goals and how some people might perceive it as, self-arrogance.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this team-oriented environment?
That's the paradox, isn't it? On one hand, you need that individual drive. You
Right.
need that ambition to be the best. But on the other hand, you need to make sure those personal goals align with the team's objectives.
It's about finding that balance between pushing yourself and supporting your teammates. Do you think his approach is something that can be learned, or is it just part of who he is?
I think it's a bit of both, honestly.
Okay.
I think some people are naturally more driven than others.
Right,
But I also think we can cultivate that mindset, that hunger for improvement.
right.
And it starts with setting clear goals, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, and being willing to put in the work.
So it's a combination of nature and nurture.
Yeah,
Gordon's story suggests that we can all tap into that drive, that obsession to a certain extent. But, he also makes this really interesting observation about Newcastle's culture. He talks about how it, naturally weeds out those who don't buy in.
right.
And he gives the example of Alexander Isak, right,
Yeah,
who came in with a high transfer fee and has proven his worth over time. It's not just about talent.
yeah.
It's about fitting into that team dynamic. So what do you think are, the key ingredients of a culture that attracts and retains the right people?
I think clarity of purpose is huge.
Okay.
Everyone needs to understand the team's goals and values. There needs to be a shared sense of direction. And of course, there needs to be that willingness to work hard, to push each other to be better.
Right.
It's like a garden. You have to cultivate the right conditions for those plants to thrive.
It sounds like you're saying that culture isn't just about perks or a cool office space.
No, not at all.
It's something much deeper.
It is.
Shared values,
Mm-hmm.
a commitment to excellence, a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And you can't fake that. It either exists or it doesn't. And Gordon seems to have found that at Newcastle.
Now let's switch gears for a second and talk about the power of the home crowd.
Okay.
Remember how we were laughing about Gordon not having experienced a packed St. James's Park on a European night yet?
I do. Yeah.
He described the fans' intensity,
Yeah.
almost religious fervor for the club. And it's more than just noise, right?
It is.
He's talking about this collective energy,
Yeah.
this feeling of being swept up in something so much larger than yourself.
I get it.
It makes you wonder how that impacts the players.
Totally. It must be exhilarating and a little bit intimidating too, right?
Think about it. You're out there on the field and you've got, tens of thousands of people roaring their support.
Wow.
It's got to feel like you could achieve anything.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the home team, right?
Right.
What about the impact on the opposing team?
Yeah. That's the flip side of it, right?
Yeah.
Imagine stepping out onto that field as the visiting team.
Oh, man.
The noise, the intensity, it's got to be overwhelming.
Yeah,
It's as much a psychological battle as it is a physical one.
absolutely. It's like a force multiplier. Amplifies the home team's strengths, magnifies the visiting team's weaknesses.
Exactly. And Gordon's description really captures that. He's not just talking about the volume, he's talking about the feeling, the atmosphere.
Okay, so we've delved into Gordon's individual journey, his team's journey, the impact of the home crowd. What's next? Well, Gordon is clearly really excited about the new England manager and the upcoming World Cup.
Of course.
He even had a little chat with the manager recently, which seems to have boosted his confidence even more.
That's great.
And of course, we can't forget his cheeky request to bring Chelsea's Ben Chilwell to Newcastle,
Oh, right.
which, interesting considering their positions.
Yeah, that is funny.
But that's Gordon in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Ambitious, driven, and always thinking a few steps ahead. It's that hunger, that relentlessness that makes him so fascinating to follow.
I agree.
Okay, we've covered so much in this part of our deep dive. When we come back, I want to explore his views on ambition, leadership, and what it really takes to build a winning culture. Stick with us. Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into Anthony Gordon. We've talked about his obsession with getting better, his dedication to Newcastle, that incredible home crowd. But there's one more thing, one more thread I want to kind of pull at here. Throughout the whole interview, he keeps coming back to this idea of ambition.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to be upfront about it either.
She's not, no.
He even says that some people might find his level of ambition a little off-putting, calling it self-arrogance.
Right.
But he makes this point, that you can't really achieve anything without that inner belief,
Mm-hmm.
that confidence in your own abilities.
It's true. It's a really fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, where do you think that line is? Like between confidence and arrogance,
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't think there's an easy answer.
right?
It's probably different for everyone, but for Gordon, it seems like it's about backing up that ambition with action.
Okay.
He's not just talking about being the best, he's putting in the work every single day to make it happen.
It's not just talk, it's about walking the walk. Which brings us back to leadership. Even though he's young, he's already showing signs of being a leader, on and off the field. What do you see, like, what are the key qualities that make him stand out as a leader?
I think it's that willingness to lead by example. He's
Okay.
not asking anyone to do anything he's not willing to do himself. He sets that bar high in terms of his work ethic, his dedication to the team.
So he's like, follow me, I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about barking orders or anything like that. It's about inspiring others through his own actions.
Right, right.
And it's about communication, too. He's not afraid to voice his opinion
Mm-hmm.
or to challenge the status quo. He's got strong convictions,
Yeah.
and he's not afraid to share them.
It's interesting that willingness to be open about his ambition, even though it might rub some people the wrong way, it can actually be a strength when it comes to leadership.
It's true.
I think it goes back to just authenticity.
Yeah. People can tell.
People can tell when someone is genuine,
Mm-hmm.
when they're not putting on an act.
Absolutely.
And his willingness to just be himself, even if it's not always perfect, I think that makes him really relatable and inspiring.
Yeah, I agree. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Culture. Gordon's talked about how Newcastle's culture weeds out those who don't buy in, right?
Yeah.
He's also talked about the importance of everyone growing together, shared goals. What do you think are the key ingredients to a winning culture?
It starts with a clear vision, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to understand what they're working towards.
Yeah.
And it can't just be about winning trophies or hitting some financial target.
Right.
It has to be something deeper, something that connects with people emotionally.
So it's got to be about purpose,
Yeah,
feeling like you're a part of something bigger than yourself.
exactly. And it also needs to be a culture that values hard work, dedication,
Mm-hmm.
continuous improvement. A culture where people are encouraged to push themselves, to push each other to be better.
Create an environment where excellence is just like the expectation.
The norm.
And that brings us back to Anthony Gordon.
Full circle.
He embodies that. He's driven, he's ambitious, he's dedicated.
Absolutely.
And he's not afraid to challenge things, push the boundaries.
I agree.
Really insightful looking at this interview with him.
It has been, yeah.
So as we wrap this up, what's the one thing that stands out to you about Anthony Gordon? What should our listener take away from all of this?
The power of belief. I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Gordon believes in himself. He believes in his team.
Yeah.
And he believes in his ability to achieve great things.
Mm-hmm.
And that belief, it's contagious.
Yeah,
It inspires those around him.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we all have the potential to achieve great things, right?
Absolutely.
If we're willing to put in the work and believe in ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another one.
See you then.